Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Boone, and I am co-chair along with Etty DeVoe of the P&A Senate Professional Development and Recognition Subcommittee. On behalf of the P&A Senate and our 17-member subcommittee, we just really want to welcome you and thank you for coming. But also, we have persons viewing from sites in Duluth and our Morris campuses. We have 50-plus people online viewing from their desktops system-wide here. And we are just so ecstatic to be able to offer each and every one of you an opportunity to hear from our distinguished panelists here who are experts in their fields. And we are here in our inaugural Professional Development Forum. Thank you again for coming. Before beginning our program, I'd like to take a moment to talk about a couple of housekeeping items. Following our panel discussion today, we will have an opportunity to actually ask questions of our panelists. And the way that will look is that questions would be given to our mic hosts, and if you can raise your hands. And so once you have questions, they'll have index cards here so that you can write your question down, and then that can be entertained by our panelists here. Lastly, you'll notice on your program there's a mini duster on the front. The very back page is perforated, and it can be removed. There's what we would like for you to do is think about topics that you would like to be aired, topics you'd like to have some information about for our upcoming year. And so you can write those down on one side. The other side is a feedback on our forum today. And so once you fill that out on your way out as you depart today, feel free to drop it in a basket on the registration table. And then now, without further delay, it is my honor to introduce our Vice President of Human Resources. She was appointed to the post in 2011, and she has served the university exceptionally well for well over a decade in a variety of leadership roles here at the university. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Brown.
Really?
Thank you, Sherry, and welcome everyone to this inaugural P&A Senate Professional Development Forum. I'm certainly very pleased to see a room full of people here and to know that there's many people online as well partaking of this opportunity. So thank you very much for your commitment to learning and to the university. The theme for today is development, and this is a theme that invites you to explore the roles you play now and the roles you may want to play in the future, to learn, to reflect, and to enjoy the rapidly changing world in which we live here on campus. Our panelists have looked into the future. That's what they've been asked to do, and they will tell us about some competencies that are needed to support our strategic plan and the university mission. As I kick this program off, I challenge you to do three things as you enjoy the program here today. Hopefully they are action-oriented and there's something that you can put your mind around and fully engage in over the next couple of hours here. First, have your eyes wide open. Very important to make sure that you are looking, learning, listening. And if I could say the one skill that I think we all need to continue to work on to become better professionals, it is emotional intelligence. So think about how emotional intelligence fits into this equation for you as you move forward. The second, I encourage you to take greater ownership for your own professional development, to not necessarily wait for someone to put the opportunity in front of you, but to think about as you move forward, what are some other things I'd like to learn and how can I take charge of my own future and look for additional opportunities to expand my knowledge. So to take the bold step of being a self-directed learner and charting your own plan. And the third thing is to start to think from a power base, thinking from your strengths as opposed to thinking, oh, gee, I'm not very good at this, I need to work and correct that. But rather think, how can I apply the strengths that I have? How can I maybe use those strengths in partnership with another? Or how can I use those strengths to maybe pull up some of the areas where I'd like to also expand my learning? So think about your strengths. And after thinking about those three, and you're sitting here, as you're jotting down notes, write your own personal takeaways from today that you would like to pursue after the program is over. And those are the action steps that I encourage you to give some thought to. Let me close by thanking our panelists who are sitting here in the front row. I won't name them all. They're listed in the program with their biographies. And let me just say, I know them. They're an esteemed group, and I know that they will have great information to impart to you. And let me thank Eddie and Sherry, the co-chairs of the Professional Development and Recognition Subcommittee of the P&A Senate. There is a great deal of work that goes on behind the scenes to make these programs happen, and these two have provided the leadership along with the committee membership to make this event happen. And finally, to Kit Leffler, who designed today's program, which really is very attractive, and I love the little flyer piece on the front. That's super. So great work to all of those in preparation of the program. I hope you have a wonderful, enjoyable afternoon full of learning and enrichment and challenge. Thank you very much.
All right, the first thing I'm supposed to do is test my mic, but I think I've accomplished that because I can hear myself echoing throughout the room. Thank you very, very much for coming, and to Vice President Brown, who has had to go. We're in Regents Week, and so it's back-to-back meetings. She's given us a wonderful charge and gotten us off to a great start, and I am certain that you will hear some of the things that she's introduced echoed throughout today's panel. This is intended to be a conversation. Sans PowerPoint, so no PowerPoint, just a good old-fashioned chat, okay? And what we're talking about primarily is the roles that P&As play and will need to play in the university, and the training and development necessary to prepare us to support the university in the future. Let me just remind our online participants that they can send questions via the chat feature on WebEx. We are collecting those, and we have left ample time for questions. Let me introduce the panel. Full bios are available in your program, and so I'll just give you the upshot. And panelists, as I read your names, please come up. Dean Mary Nichol. She is Dean of our College of Continuing Education here at the University of Minnesota, a position she's held since September of 2001. She also holds an appointment as Professor of Strategic Management and Organization in the Carlson School of Management. Her research and teaching specialties are in strategy implementation, leadership, and change in organization. She earned degrees in mathematics and has a PhD in organization studies from the University of Kansas. Lars Leifblad. Lars is principal and co-founder of Ballinger Leifblad, an executive search firm here in the Twin Cities. He earned his BA in economics from St. Olaf College, his MBA from the Carlson School of Management, and has participated as a Humphrey Policy Fellow with the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, where he also served as Chief Development Officer. Lars brings broad experience related to today's discussion. He worked in the Leadership Development Program at GE, General Electric, in a high-tech startup during the internet boom. He co-chaired a civic practice at Keystone, another Twin Cities-based executive search firm, and led the Bush Fellowship leadership programs for the Bush Foundation. Dr. Daniel Peshet. He's a professor of nursing in the Nursing Population Health and Systems Cooperative Unit of the School of Nursing here at the University of Minnesota. He's also director of the Catherine J. Danford International Center for Nursing Leadership. And he holds the Catherine R. and Walter C. Lilly High Chair in Nursing Leadership. He's a popular author, speaker, coach, and consultant, and is known for his ability to inspire and support people as they develop creative ideas and design innovative practices with a desired future in mind. Chris Schultz. Chris is a University of Minnesota College of Human Ecology alum with a BS in Human Relationships. He's currently Senior Human Resources Manager at Beckman Coulter, where he's principally responsible for supporting the organization's North American Commercial Operations team. Chris's major areas of professional focus include talent acquisition, organizational development, talent management, and performance management. He serves, with me, on the Board of Advisors for Employee Strategies, where he provides leadership direction and counsel on building great places to work. And Dr. Mary Cameron. Dr. Cameron holds an EDD in Organizational Leadership and Policy Development and a master's degree in social work from the University of Minnesota. She also holds a master's in public administration and conflict resolution from Syracuse University. She's the Associate Director of Human Resources at the University of Minnesota Duluth. She currently serves on the Minnesota Supreme Court Governor Judicial Selection Committee, is an active member of the NAACP, and has served 4 terms on the Duluth School Board. She's also the recipient of the President's Award for Outstanding Services for the University of Minnesota. Our discussion today is centered on 3 primary questions. And for each question, I've asked our panelists to spend 3 minutes in response time. As I've let our panelists know, as necessary, I will move them along. But we really do want to have a great conversation. Our topic, preparing ourselves to meet grand challenges. So panelists, we've asked you to think about the contemporary trends in academic administration and the challenges facing universities vis-a-vis administrative support, and to think about what roles P&As will and must play in the academy and what attributes and competencies we will need in the future to support it. We have 2 Marys today, so I'm going to refer to Mary N, who's Nichols, and Mary C. So Mary N, in addition to your work at the University of Minnesota, you serve on the Governor's Workforce Development Council, the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership Board, and the Itasca Workforce Alignment Team. So from those vantage points, what are the trends you're seeing and what challenges are institutions like us and specifically the university facing in terms of academic support?
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you all for coming. There's a number of familiar faces in the audience, and I know you to be really dedicated and inspired employees of the university, and I thank you for being here. And thanks to the P&A Senate and Sherry for organizing this. I think it's a terrific idea. So we'll try to make sure that this isn't the last inaugural professional. So I get out and about quite a bit in different venues, in addition to just operating around the university and having been here for a very long time. I think context is what influences what leadership is required. So let me make some observations about 3 elements of the context that I see here now, and I don't see those changing. So I think they are here to stay, and some of you could write this script probably. One is decreased public funding for public institutions. for public education in general, an increased level of competition for our services, for rankings, for reputation, for students, for top faculty, for research dollars, and on it goes. And it's an increasing pace of change for which we're all jockeying for position in that intense competition. And the third big element of the environment that I observe that I think will not change, and that is I've seen increasingly sophisticated management skills being used in the university. I've been here a long time, and I really see that we've upped our game. And so I think the ability to step up and be leaders and good managers in this kind of context is going to be increasingly challenging. So let me dive below the surface of each one of them just for a second. Decreased public funding for public education. Don't believe it's going to reverse itself significantly. So we need to be very focused with our resources. First, we try to stretch them, and that can only last so long. And then we need to make choices, and I think we're beginning to make choices in different areas. I think we have to be stewards of the resources that we have, but also innovators to try to grow the resources that we can somehow or other garner. So we're stewards and innovators at the same time. Most of the positions that most of us are in, including dean jobs, I would say they're essential to supporting the core work, but we're overhead. And I think there'll be an increasing need to make sure that as we do these jobs and support the mission, that we're as efficient and as trim on the overhead as we can possibly be. With regard to competition, I think the competition that we've seen in the business world has come to our environment. I don't see that changing. Higher ed may be slower to be harmed from competition than businesses are. They just have reduced sales and eventually they go out of business. I see that happening with us, but the competition is here to stay, and we've all experienced the rapid changes that are driving us from technology to increased competition for students, to increased competition for faculty, and so forth. To say nothing of changes in the learner preferences over time and what they want, what they expect. So there's many forces of change, and they just won't be going away. The result of that, I think, is with continued change, we have to be agile, and we have to be quicker at making change. So, and then the final one, we've come back to this one, increasing sophistication of management skills and a requirement for leadership skills. Those two things are different in my mind, but let me come back to this.
Very good, and that actually leads us very nicely into a response from Lars. Lars's work has included sourcing high-level talent for the U of M and for competitors for our talent, right? So I know you've taken quite a bit of time understanding the trends in higher ed because it's important to your work. We're hearing from Dean Nichols about context and this increasing sophistication and skills. What are you seeing, Lars?
Well, I'll just echo Dean Nichols in saying thank you for having us and for showing up. Kudos to you for showing up, which is the first step in being active, engaged, and charting your own path forward. I would echo some of the feedback about what we're seeing as we work with clients in higher education, and we talk with leaders both in the P&A, faculty, ranks, and networks about new opportunities and how they might consider those. I do think that that era of increased competition and scarcity of resources driving a different type of behavior and different type of mindset is here to stay. I think that when we talk to clients, and I'll maybe come at it from that perspective, as we sit down with a search committee or search co-chairs, and we talk through what filters and lenses they want us to be thinking through as we bring the qualifications out to market, there are certainly consistencies across the type of roles, and there are certainly the subset of specific experience. But I think some of the attributes that I would say we hear continuously, here are some of those. Entrepreneurial mindset, and that notion of seeing and thinking about questions, and I saw some on the screen as we were sitting down from others across the university, things like curiosity, asking why, asking what if. I mean, it's the mindset of saying, in the era of less, higher demands for the what, how do we as P&A serve as that synapse between resource, opportunity, and impact? So it's an entrepreneurial mindset, which again seeks to say, how can we create? It doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur and set out on your own, but that notion of seeing those challenges as opportunities to make impact in whatever context and capacity you can. I think the notion of, again, an attribute and a competency that we see from clients is the ability to translate. And what I mean by that is not necessarily language, but it's cultural competency. It's understanding how do I show up and how am I making impact between my role, between our faculty, our students, other stakeholders, my P&A. I mean, that's the world as a former P&A. I know I lived for 4 years here at the university, working for our dean at the Humphrey School. And you see that apply in terms of show us examples. Tell us about examples where you brought together diverse stakeholders or diverse constituencies to solve problems or create activity. And so again, I think that notion of thinking of yourself as a synapse, as someone who can bring together disparate constituencies to solve problems is a skill set we get asked about continuously. You know, show us how you've been able to reach across. And the final, I would say, in terms of, I'll just pick up on what Dean Nichols mentioned about sophistication of management skills. You know, from an individual contributor role, you can still demonstrate the aptitude to be an effective manager, and it's managing oneself in terms of how you're seeking out the chance to grow, the opportunity to take on more, the opportunity to convene volunteer activity here at the university or in your comparable type of association or institutional development. And so I would just say that, again, showing that proactivity around one's own career, one's own development, whether you're 3 years into your career at the university or you're approaching a 15-year mark, something that our clients are saying, show us through your career how you've taken initiative to continue to grow and develop oneself.
Great. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, I'm Dan Peshet, as you all know. So one of my favorite heroes is Richard Leiter and David Shapiro, who's written a book called Packing and Repacking Your Bags, Lighten the Load for the Rest of Your Life. And they talk about the good life as being in the place you belong, with the people you love, doing the right work on purpose. And I think if you have all of those elements, you are engaged and empowered to do the best that you can. So I'm also a firm believer in strength and values clarification, core values. But I think the skill that you really need is how do you navigate and negotiate competing values? How do you manage the tension between creating and controlling, between competing and collaborating? And so polarity management, I think, is a huge skill for people to have. And I think that that relates a lot to what people have to do individually in terms of inner work for outer service. And so the Institute for the Future has done a little study about 10 skills necessary for a 2020 workforce. And they are sense-making, the ability to determine deep meaning of what's happening, social intelligence, the ability to connect with others, novel and adaptive thinking, cross-cultural competence, which I think is a theme we're hearing here, computational thinking, the ability to translate vast amounts of data into abstract concepts, new media literacy, the ability to critically assess and develop content that uses new media forms, transdisciplinarity, a design mindset we've heard about, cognitive load management, which is the ability to discriminate and filter information for importance and to understand how to maximize cognitive functioning using a variety of tools and techniques. And virtual collaboration, the ability to productively drive engagement and demonstrate presence as a member of a virtual team. I think there's a lot to be said about strategic self-management in terms of your identity, your reputation, and your legacy. We can talk more about that later.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And Chris, I know that you return often to the university to talk on these topics, more specifically talking to our graduates about entering the workforce. What are the challenges that you're seeing for the institution, and then the competencies that we should be looking at developing?
Sure. And thanks again. I'll echo what the rest of the panel said. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I wish I could have gone first, Etty, because a lot of what I was thinking about these guys have talked about. So, oh well, I can hopefully add a little bit of value. The few things I'm thinking about, they all have to do with leadership. I think leadership is going to get, whether it's an institution or a company like I work for, Beckman Coulter, to where it wants to go, where it needs to go. To me, in the end, it's about leadership. So that'll be a lot of my focus for the next hour or so. Specifically, the term leading, effective leadership in a lean environment. And I wondered if that was applicable here, and it's already been, I already know it is, because I heard Larry use the term stay trim on overhead. that resonates with us. I heard Lars talk about an era of less, and I think we're all saying the same thing. Ever since the recession, we're being asked to do more and more with less and less. So if we have an associate that resigns, we're always asking the first question, you have to replace the person. And sometimes we get to and sometimes we don't. So it's
I'm
always,
sure that's something we don't hear at
yeah,
all, Chris.
I'm sure that never happens anywhere, right? Any organization. So that's, we get that quite a bit. So effective leadership in that lean environment where you are asked to do a lot more with less resources, less funding, less of everything basically, is a real interesting challenge that I don't see going away anytime soon. The second challenge and it's a great opportunity as well, is leading across multiple generations. And I think that's also applicable in a university setting. It's definitely applicable for us. We're about to have 5 generations in the workplace, right? It's really quite incredible. So the kids, right? My son's starting college this summer, or I'm going to say kid, but these kids starting college this fall are part of the generation that has not even been named yet. I'm hearing it to even be called Gen Z or maybe Gen I, lowercase I for iTunes and iPhones and all that kind of good stuff. So we'll see what it's eventually named, but with them coming into the workplace, and you got the millennials, the Gen Ys, you got the Xers like myself, the boomers, and there are still some people from the veteran and mature generation that either had to come back to work after the recession or couldn't leave in the first place because they've lost a lot of their savings. And the leadership implications for all of us with that many generations is just going to be astounding and really, really interesting. So we'll talk about that more in a bit. So that's the second one. Third, and Dan mentioned this too, so I'm going to steal his now, and that's really a focus on strengths and values. There's a kind of a strength-based development premise that I think is really important. From a young age, we are all taught from our parents or guardians to kind of focus on what's wrong, what needs fixing. If you brought home 5 A's on your report card and you brought home 1 C, your mom or dad, your guardian, what did they say? Why'd you get a C? And you say, well, Mom and Dad, what about the 5 A's I got? Yeah, that's fine. What about the C? How do you improve that? So we're taught at an early age to fix what's wrong. I think having a strength-based leadership, brand, style, identity is something that will really help carry us forward as well.
I want to hold us for just a minute on a point that Chris made and ask the panel to respond to this notion of changing demographics at the university and what you're seeing from where you sit. In 2014, Forbes magazine listed a crisis of leadership as one of the primary challenges facing institutions. So thinking about what Chris has just said about the 5 generations and the challenges that pose to leadership, I'd love to hear your thoughts before we get to Mary to round out this first question. So, yeah, anyone who's... Sure, go ahead.
Pass it to me. Imagine, yeah.
And maybe,
Thinking about all these
with
generations.
continuing education and what you see there, Mary.
Yeah, exactly. I made a comment that I think management skills are becoming increasingly sophisticated. I think there's a shortage of leadership skills. And I like the way all of you have talked about leadership, and I'll come back to that a little bit. So I do think, as we look at multiple generations in the workforce, and many of the younger generations aren't ready to lead, but I think the challenge for those of us who are Xers or boomers is to figure out how to lead an organization that's very diverse in every possible way, whether age demographic or whatever diversity we're fortunate to have there. So I think there is a shortage, frankly, of leadership. And when we come back to toward the end of perhaps and talk about what should we really be working on, I think it's leadership. Probably doesn't surprise you, right? That's what you're here for too. Any thoughts?
I mean, I just echo. I mean, can there ever be enough leadership? In terms of personal stepping up to take on risk, to take on challenge. I'm struck by there's a research here that I recall reading in Harvard Business Review about leadership and how adept we are as a species, human beings, very rapidly to assess potential. 30 seconds in, on two variables that when someone we meet, warmth and competence in terms of the ability to be someone that they know what they're talking about, and there's a trust component of I believe what they're telling me, or they find them approachable. So as ingredients of, that's interesting, right? It doesn't have title associated, it doesn't have experience, it has some pretty basic components of can I demonstrate empathy, put myself in one's shoes, and can I know what I'm talking about when I open my mouth to not listen and to talk. And so I think those soft skills, again, any search that we're working on with a client, we're listening for those two things. And pretty quickly you can see how are those showing up for someone right out of college or someone who's 25 years into a career. And there's no right answer, but certainly things that we look for in every leadership engagement we work on.
I think we've not done a very good job of succession planning. For example, in my discipline, and by 2019, 80% of the faculty teaching today will be retired. And there is not a wave of people wanting to step into those positions. And so I think succession planning is really key. And the other side of that is I don't think we've done a very good job of knowledge transfer. We have, out of those 80% of people leaving, they have incredible amounts of institutional memory and wisdom that we are trying to figure out how to extract. And we actually have some projects going on where we're interviewing people with a sense-making methodology called SAGES and extracting critical decision points and then passing that information on to the next person in line. So succession planning and knowledge transfer, I think, are huge.
I think those are all great points, and I think to specifically answer the question, Eddie, around how do you really lead in the future across multiple generations, I think it really starts with just an understanding of what motivates and drives those different generations. I think too many times we don't do that. And in our organization, we're getting better, but we're nowhere near where we need to be thus far. So we recently brought in a generational expert and spoke to our entire sales management team about, if you're working with someone just out of college, here's how you approach him or her. If you're a 30-year veteran who's been in sales for all that time, here's how you're going to approach that person. They're vastly different. They come from very different places. So I think it's a understanding of where they're coming from, what motivates them and drives them, and then a really important implication of leadership is being able to be situational and being able to change on the fly. If you don't have that sort of agility, you're going to have a real struggle as a leader, I think, with all these generations and changing workplace. Great.
Thank you, Chris. And now we'll go to Mary C., who's going to tell us from the HR perspective internal to the institution, which is where she sits. What are you seeing as the challenges?
Okay, I'm going to probably talk really fast. I didn't think I would be able to talk 3 minutes, but after hearing all of my colleagues here, I think I will. First of all, I want to thank you and Sherry for having me here, and my colleagues in Duluth for suggesting my name. When I think about contemporary trends from the HR perspective, I think that skills are more complex. It requires adaptive thinking. And it's very important that we learn how to manage across generational differences. The environment is changing globally, and I think that we're not doing a good enough job to prepare ourselves as perceived leaders and prepare our staff to know how to interact with people that are different from ourselves. I heard you talk about, Kathy Brown mentioned empathy, not empathy, she mentioned emotional. What is it? Intelligence. I think that's important. Now, from an HR perspective, I used to tell people when I would read their performance evaluations, leave your emotions out. But I think that emotions are important, and we need to be able to show empathy. From a budget perspective, I'm sure most of you know what we're going through in Duluth with our budget. I think that budget needs to be distributed more equitable, I think. And when we talk about development and personal development, I hear from an HR side that some employees from different units don't have the funds for professional development. They want it. Some units have more money so that they're able to send their employees to various professional trainings, send them to national conferences. I think all those are important. I think phased retirement, when you think about your baby boomers and others that are leaving in succession planning, in order for that to happen, I think the university needs to look at phased retirement for their P&A employees to provide that opportunity for succession planning so that those skills can be passed on. In my position, I am trying to do succession planning with those that I supervise. I am trying to provide an opportunity for them to attend as many professional development opportunities as possible. I think it's important. And I think that we need to recognize talent regardless of what employee group a person is in. We got our AFSCME employees, we got our Teamsters, and I think that it's important for us to tap in on those skills that they have. I think it's important that we do develop, that we take control of our own development, but does that mean I come out of my pocket if I want to go to a conference, or is my department going to be able to provide those funds for me to attend a conference? I personally don't see myself as a leader. I think others do. I think in order for me to be able to interact with people who are different, I need to know who they are, and that means sometimes I have to change the way I manage. I need to get to know each and every individual that I supervise. So you do have to have adaptive styles of leading, being culturally competent to interact with people who are different as well. I think I touched on everything that I wanted to touch on, and I do want to point out one thing. I no longer serve on the Minnesota Supreme Court Governor's Judicial Selection Committee. I did serve 3 terms, so.
Very good. We'll correct the record. We have 70 people online, and questions are already coming in. We'll hold those to the end of the discussion. But one thing that is being asked, Dan, is that you repeat the source that you referred to on the 10 competencies. So if you can repeat that, and we'll get that.
I do have a handout too of references and resources, and I think it's on there. But it's the Institute of the Future, and they did this research for Phoenix Research Institute, and there is a URL, Future Work Skills 2020 PDF. You could probably Google that. It's pretty easy.
Very good. So our second question we've touched on, but I'll ask it again, and I'll ask it very directly. Based on the trends we're seeing, which was that first question, what role will P&As and must P&As play? And again, competencies to support leadership in the academy. So let's start at the middle of the table this time. So Dan, do you want to take that first, just as you're passing the mic there?
We're adaptable, yeah. So I think P&As are actually the glue that holds the system together. It really, and I think one of the key things that you have to develop is your polarity management skills and your competing value skills. And you have to be able to navigate and negotiate difficult people, quite frankly. And there is a neuroscience coach, David Rock, who has something called the SCARF model, SCARF. S stands for status, C stands for certainty, A stands for autonomy, R stands for relatedness, and F stands for fairness. And based on his research, he suggests that if you have status, if you have certainty, if you have autonomy, if you have relatedness, and if you have fairness, then all of your reward circuits in your brain are activated, and you are in a good state. If, however, you're not feeling status, you have a lot of uncertainty, you don't have any autonomy, you don't feel any relatedness, or you think things are not fair, your pain circuits are activated. And so I think that model has proved very useful to me in terms of thinking about dynamics in organizations that I work in, as well as individuals. And this whole notion about competing values, I think paradoxical leadership is key. You've got to be able to manage the tension of opposites. I think it was Mary Oliver that said, life is bipolar, everything contains its opposite. And so you have got to be in the middle of a Mobius strip, figuring out what the polarities are and how to make explicit all the polarities. So Barry Johnson's work on polarity management, I think, is a key skill for P&A people to have.
Very good. Chris?
Yeah, there's a couple of competencies that come to mind related to some of the things that I've talked about. I talked earlier about the importance of developing kind of a strengths-based leadership style or brand, and I think that's important for a number of reasons. And I think having a very transparent style is something that also lends itself very well in whether it's in the workplace, no matter what the industry is. We have found that in helping our people develop styles of transparency and strength-based, that the workplace is a much better place to be from our perspective. People are more productive. People are happier. Their job satisfaction skyrockets. We do engagement surveys, and our engagement surveys go the right way, not the wrong way when we've got this type of style. Now, we're not perfect. We've got lots of room for growth still, but when we focused on some of those right types of things, we found a real difference. So I think really honing in and identifying on that strength-based, transparent leadership style is something that's really good. Part of that style, I think you can take some certain inventories, leadership personality inventories. There's one called the DISC, which basically talks about your workplace style in terms of identifying how you react and relate to the outer world around us. And DISC is, of course, an acronym. D stands for dominance, kind of a dominant type style. I is an influencer. S is steadiness. And C is conscientiousness. And that's a great way to kind of identify, here's who I am, here's how I interact with other people, and this is my brand. And once you have that sort of knowledge and awareness across yourself as a leader and your people that you work with, we found a real difference. And I think that make a difference for all of you in the P&A role as well. I think it's very relevant overall. I think another important competency, and certainly is for a group like this, is around artful delegation. So I'm guessing that in your roles, many of you have to take on quite a bit. Again, the more with less type of a thing, and you can't do it all. And I think being able to artfully delegate tasks, initiatives to the people around you, whether they be a direct report or a peer, is a critical component as well. So it's basically it's leading and it's getting things done through others, and that's a difficult thing to sometimes do if you're not used to it. But I think in order to survive in the types of environments where we're going, that delegation is really, really important. And an important part of that is analyzing and understanding the readiness of the people around you. So I don't know if I'm trying to get into that today, but there's a whole analysis you can do with people around you to decide, is Susie ready for X, Y, or Z? Is Johnny ready for this? That sort of delegation type mindset, I think, is really critical as well.
Very good. And let me just note that Uke here, Dr. Sham, is taking note of our time. Thank you very much. Mary C. Pardon me. There are two Marys. Mary C.
Mary C. A couple of things. The very first thing that I had written down, and it goes, I think, ties in with the unpredictable situation that we're in with the global differences, the environmental changes. I think it's important for us to have the ability to see from an inclusive lens, and I just heard you talk about the DISC and being able to manage various conflict styles. At UMD, we're actually going through a program that's the Intercultural Development Leadership, and the DISC is a part of it, as is the intercultural conflict style, and we also do a cultural competency to see where we are on a continuum. And so that's part of a leadership that actually we're building capacity so that we are able, as UMD employees, to administer this training at our campus. And I think over 150 people have gone through the program already. I think it's important for us to know how to supervise our employees. I see that as an issue in my role in the HR department, and also manage their performance. I think it's too often that supervisors want to exit those employees through layoff and other methods that are in place, as opposed to really managing their employees. And now with UMD, we're just entering our merit pay system. It's been very challenging. And I see Jennifer Engler out there in the audience, and one of those roles too, I think, in skills is being able to interpret the data and to be able to be flexible, because sometimes you may just get thrown into a position, as I have with the merit pay and also with our survey engagement. I'm the lead for our campus. I think it's important for me and for others to develop those skills and to renew those competencies that we think that we're really good in. I think that being able to collaborate across the campus is going to be more important based on our budget situation and shared services, that we learn how to shared services that we provide, and sometimes that may lead to layoffs, but I think that given the budget situation, we're going to be looking at more collaboration and more shared services roles.
Very good. Lars, I don't know which Lyle is on my mind this morning, and I'm not telling any secrets, even if I did. What are the top skill sets hiring managers who hire PNAs and PNA-like employees looking for inside the U and outside the U? So this is another way of coming at the same question. And what might that signal for the roles that PNAs will play?
I'll take a second. Okay.
Great question. Great question in terms of. Can you hear me? Keep dying.
Great question in terms of what our hiring managers or search committees, which is I think the model that I'm most familiar to working with, which is a fascinating exercise of how do we discern as a collective what we're seeking and how we assess fit. Several of the themes I think you've heard, and again, I think we've talked about leadership, and I think in a governance model like the university is a land-grant university with faculty, a teaching, research, and outreach components of the mission, and with faculty clearly at the center. I think a servant leadership mindset of how is it that we're here to amplify the impact of our research, teaching, and outreach, and how, again, a fellow panelist mentioned that notion of artful delegation. How is it that I'm able to achieve impact through others? And I think when you think about the skills that are being listened for and vetted with a hiring manager or a committee, again, it's some of these EQ, these emotional components of empathy, the ability to persuade. And the ability to persuade starts with being able to listen really, really well. And I think when there's many voices and many competing interests and urgency and pressure, I think part of what we see in exceptional candidates are, this is a truism, exceptional candidates ask the best questions. They absolutely do. In an interview process with a search committee, with us as a recruiter, they ask the best questions, which suggests to me that these are individuals who throughout their career have honed the ability to step back and ask, what does success look like? What does that mean for me? And they ask great follow-up questions. So it's hard for me, I don't have a silver bullet, and I hear the two things that you must have as you might look to interview with a new opportunity within the university. But I do think the ability to ask and empathize and listen for what is it that hiring manager or that search committee are really boiling, if they had to boil down that job description, there's usually a way that they distill it down to here's what we're really looking for. This is what success will really look like for this new P&A member 6 months, 2 years, and 5 years from now. And getting those questions on the table about what I hear you saying that success looks like for this opportunity 6 months, 2 years, 5 years from now is this, helps you and that committee or that hiring manager assess, are you the right fit? And there's no shortage of opportunities. I mean, you've heard about the retirements that are occurring, the multi-generational impact of a workforce, the complexity of new skills are going to need to be added to an enterprise of this size and complexity. So I think, again, as you look at a role, the ability to show up, ask great questions, be an active listener, demonstrate how you've shown empathy and that cultural competency throughout your career are going to serve you well no matter the role that you're exploring.
And keep your battery recharged along the way, right?
Yes.
So let me just add a few things. I would be disappointed in myself, given my background, if I didn't say something about strategic or strategery, whatever you remember about that. So I do think that honing some strategic thinking skills, I'm not talking about strategic planning, I'm just talking about strategic thinking. And people who are strategic thinkers are able to let me just boil it down. You could take a whole course on this, but you don't. But it really boils down to bigger picture, longer term. Thinking bigger picture, longer term. And so I think developing this capability for constantly stepping back and going, what's the bigger picture, longer term implication of what we're talking about? So I think a related thing to that is honing the ability to be a strong contributor to change and sometimes leading change. I think that's the environment we're in, and we're going to be staying in for a very long time to come, if not forever. So there are things that one can learn about being a leader of change. So I would put a plug in for that one. And then the third thing that sort of fits with those, and Laura sort of set this up too, is I think cultivating the ability and being externally focused. It's very easy, and I think we're really commonly inside the university. It's about me, it's about my research, it's about whatever. But it isn't. It's, I think those people who will be most successful as leaders will be those people that are outwardly focused. It's about the customer or the client. It's about the student. It's about the audience. It's about the people whose work we support through our role and so forth. So I think this ability to be outwardly focused is going to serve us well also.
I think we heard from you, Chris?
On that topic? No,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Really want to echo what Lars said. I really agree with all his points. I think we, over the last 20 years, I think we've gotten a lot better about interviewing for what we call the what versus the how. So the what is, can they come and do the job? That's obviously very critical. They have to come and be able to do the job. They need to be qualified for the job. But how they do the job is just as important from my perspective. It should be, I think, from your perspectives, when you say so, as the what. So we could hire the smartest PhD rocket science from this university, but if they can't support my company's vision, mission, if they're not aligned with our values of teamwork, integrity, and leadership, I don't want the person. I want to run from the person, actually. So that what, that, you said before, that cultural environmental fit is so incredibly critical, and it really should be something that everyone's, if you're a hiring manager, that to me is one of the most critical aspects of your role is hiring that right type of talent. It's going to be the right fit in your whether it's on your team or the university in general. So absolutely, I think that's critical.
Great. I'm going to do a time check. We're at 12:56. We're scheduled to go until about 1:05 before we take questions. So let's turn to our next question with that in mind. The thing that we're all here to get your counsel on, training and development opportunities. What should we pursue? What should the institution provide? We've heard time and time again that the times, they are a-changing. We've heard that here, and I like a little Dylan in the afternoon myself. That reference will be lost on some of you, but that's okay. So the landscape is increasingly difficult, and it's impossible for those who think that remaining status quo in terms of development is an option. We've heard that from you. And that is applied to individuals as well as to the institution. In terms of personal agency, what of it is personal agency? What of it is institutional agency? What should we be doing as individuals? What should the institution be doing in terms of training and development? Mary Ann, looks like you're just ready to go.
I'm so totally ready. So here's some tips for what they're worth. Associate with people you can learn from. Have your eyes wide open. So you go to a meeting and it's going really well, and you observe the meeting leader, and you kind of go, what is it they're doing? So this university is filled with talented people that are good at different things, but it's a veritable social science laboratory. So Kathy, I think, used the phrase, keep your eyes wide open. I would say that too, and consciously associate with people that you can learn from and reflect on what you're seeing. A tip that I would provide is to read and learn outside your field. I think there's a lot of value sometimes. We can get deeper in our own field, but sometimes we step outside it, and we get some, just amazing insights from how they do it in the corporate world or how they do it in some other country. So related to that, I would be looking to learn across sectors. So people from healthcare, people from the business world, people from other sectors. And with that, I'm going to put a plug in. We partner with Office of Human Resources in the College of Continuing Education, hundreds of courses a year in professional development. I think one of the big advantages of them is that there's a mixture of people from a whole bunch of different industries there. They love to hear from university folks, and university folks seem to love to hear from them. So learn across sectors. And I would just plug on to that, just a little plug, if you will. I'm going to get your email addresses and send you an email and provide you a link to the website, because we do work with OHR in this, and I think it's like 50% off for a course or something of that nature. So anyway, with that plug, I would say take formal courses and take them when you can from where there's going to be people from different sectors and different walks of life, so you can learn across. And then I guess the last one is learn how to be resilient and manage change. And on that one, boy, I think I totally defer to Dan. He's really expert on that. So I think the university can provide lots of opportunities. I do think that we ought to be the ones that seek out the things that bolster our strengths or plug a little bit of weakness here and there, or things that you may have heard today that you want to learn more about. We can.
Following Dean Nichols and that notion of learning across sectors, I wanted to share a quick story from my own time here working at the university. As was mentioned, I was the Chief Development Officer at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs from 2003 to 2007, where I worked for Brian Atwood, the dean at the time. And I remember I had the good fortune, I took advantage, as I hope many of you do, and as Dean Nichols talked about, the continuing education in front of us and around us. I applied for, was accepted at the Carlson School's part-time MBA program right after I started at the Humphrey School. And I remember sitting down with Brian, talking in the dean's office 2 weeks after I'd started my first course that fall in 2003. And just sharing the general observation is here I was as a student next door at the Carlson School. I was working for him at the Humphrey School. We had the law school just down the way, business, law, and government. My first case study in that Carlson School class was a case study on an issue at the intersection of public policy, business, and the law. And yet here we were as students with very little interaction with one another. My observation, working at the Humphrey School, and might as well have been 10 miles apart rather than 100 feet apart. And so the training and development and why it's germane is that I went to Brian and said, what about trying to bring together students from these three schools? I said, go for it. That's a great idea. Let's see what that could lead. So I took the initiative. I reached out to a couple of alums from the Humphrey School who gave us some just startup capital, a couple $100 to buy coffee for once a month, a conversation we started called Common Grounds, which has now grown into a student organization that brings together students across the university from multiple schools who meet to talk at the intersection of issues in business, government, law, and public policy. The reason I share it is when I look back at my 4 years working professionally at the university, some of the best relationships I formed were from the 30 people that convened in that room together in 2005. And it was because we took the initiative to seek out, learn from one another. And it's what's to stop you from your own world reaching out to 3 or 4 P&A colleagues at 2 other schools doing interesting work and starting something like that, a conversation group, a group to share ideas and feedback. And we didn't have a grand ambition when we launched it, other than we thought it would be interesting to learn and challenge our perceptions of what people from the law school and business school and policy school looked like and acted like. And it turned into an initiative that was very beneficial from a training and development ongoing. So, long-winded way of saying there's amazing resources at your fingertips. Take a step forward, connect with others, share some ideas, and then pay it forward what you're hearing and learning with others. And 10 years later, the group is still going. We get emails from this group, and it's remarkable to see what happens when you share together and learn together.
And I'll just share with you that in the Twin Cities Little Black Book, I don't know if Lars is going to like my sharing it with you, Lars is listed as the most connected man in Minnesota. Is that right? So this notion of connectedness and staying connected, I think, certainly should resonate with you. Dan?
So we haven't talked about a topic that probably most people don't talk about, but I think it's important to manage your dark side. I do a lot of work and have become very interested in derailers, people who get derailed, who sort of manage, all of a sudden they're doing well and then they just fall off the charts for some reason. And so there is a whole literature on managing yourself and your projections and doing shadow work, both golden shadow work and dark shadow work. And there are a lot of self-help things that you can access on the web. I have 7 pages of bibliographic references out there, and you just go to any one of those and you'll be able to probably find something that resonates to you. But 2 in particular, which I think are pretty useful, is Sherman Sarad's got a thing on positive intelligence, and he has a assessment tool where you can measure your saboteurs. There are about 7 of them. And then he talks about the tension that always exists between the saboteurs that you have and the sage part of you, the wise part of you. So there again, it's another polarity to manage in terms of saboteurs and sages. And then there's also a great 3-2-1 shadow work is really good, because what I've discovered is what I most hate about other people out there is really an issue in here. And so having been a psychotherapist for many years, I kind of come at things a little differently in terms of what constitutes success in terms of inner work for outer service. And then there's another fellow who I really come to admire who boils leadership down into 3 very simple premises: appreciation, influence, and control. His name is Bill Smith. He has an assessment tool that you can take, and he will tell you what degree of appreciation, influence, and control you embody. But the reality is as you put out appreciation, influence, and control to the world is pushing back different degrees of appreciation, influence, and control to you. And he suggests that ideal leadership is 33.33% appreciative work, 33.33% influence work, and then 33.33% control work, making a decision. So appreciate the ideal, the real, who's going to support you, who's going to oppose you, and then ultimately what are you going to do about it? So I think the takeaway is the university can have a lot of programs, but I think if you develop yourself as coach, there are a lot of resources out there to help you.
Wonderful. Chris? Yeah, go ahead.
So again, great comments here. From a development perspective, if you hadn't heard already how important I think identifying your strengths are, I'll say it one more time. I think it's critical. There's a great book called Now Discover Your Strengths, and by Marcus Buckingham. If you haven't read it, I really encourage you to read it. You can take an assessment online. It'll give you your top 5 strengths out of the 34 signature strengths. It's really good, and I've started to try to build my identity and brand around that. It's been very helpful for me. I think it's great. Along with that, Dan mentioned derailers. I think it's really important to understand derailers too. There's also a book called Why CEOs Fail. I think there are 11 key derailers that they identified. So also being aware of what might take you off the track as well. Really critical as well. And it's just a real important awareness thing. So I think there's some really key development there for P&A type people. Get outside your comfort zone once in a while. I'm kind of a steady type guy. I mentioned that DISC assessment, and I'm a high S. I'm a steady person. I kind of like predictability. Can't stand when the Wild lose 3 in a row like they have now. I'm thinking about how they lost again. But I'm in my 3rd different role with my current company, and every time it's kind of hard to start off with that new goal, but I have never regretted taking that chance, taking that risk one time, because every single time, each new tour of duty I've done with the organization, I've learned more and more, getting more and more insight, and I've been able to leave, I think, a pretty good fingerprint on whatever I was doing. And that's, in the end, what I want to do, and I think it's what all of you want to do too, and that's make an impact and difference in your everyday life. So get outside your comfort zone, take some risks. If you're a hiring professional, I think having a real clear hiring strategy is really critical as well. And knowing that profile, I'm sure Lars would agree with this as well, knowing going in what success looks like for you in the context of your organization and kind of what your current needs are in your current situation is really important. Too many times we jump into an interview and we just start interviewing, we haven't really thought through the cultural impacts, the context around us, where is this organization, where is this company currently at, and finding that right fit, I think, are critical components. And just to echo what
I'll let you finish up, and then we'll get to Mary
right,
so that
sorry.
we can get to questions. Thanks.
Sorry, and just one more. So it's been said before, but networking, network to network, network. Meet people, talk to people. You won't believe what you learn, and it's such a great path going forward as well.
Great. And Dr. Cameron?
Okay, I've heard derailing a couple of times, so I'm going to say one of the skills that I had listed was stay focused, but also know why you're being derailed. I think technology is very important. We've heard communication multiple times, and it's very important. Also listening to those you supervise and those that you don't. Strategic planning, we've gone through a strategic planning process at the University of Minnesota too. We also need those skills as PNA, but not just PNAs, but those that we supervise. I think it's important for us as leaders to find out what skills are needed in those that we supervise, what their career paths are, where they want to go, and help them develop themselves after renewing our own skills and competencies. Being transparent and honest is very important. Being able to show empathy. And as leaders, when I heard the term right fit, and that's always kind of got under my nerves a little bit, being able to define exactly what that means to your unit or to your organization. As an HR person, I'm going to be asking for that when there's search committees, when someone tells me that so-and-so, they weren't just the right fit. I'm going to want to know why and what exactly does that mean. And if we hire people to take risks, we're all asked to take risks, and then we want to get rid of them because they took those risks. I think as leaders, it's important for us to realize that there is different ways to get to the end goal. And if you ask people to take risks, that you should be in a position to support them in taking those risks.
Great. All right. We want to get to questions, and I have a first one. How much specialization should be encouraged? So this is a question of specialist versus generalist. So we'll take that as our first question. Thoughts?
I'll go real quick.
Sure.
I think that because of budgets and the fact that we're going to have to collaborate more, that we should learn to be more general, learn various skills. I've heard the panelists talk about finding people that are different from you, finding people that you can learn from, finding out what others do in their department. I think that's very important as leaders, and if you want to succeed and be successful, and if you're looking for a long-term career at the university or any businesses, you should learn multiple skills and be able to lead across groups and across units and across organizations.
Other thoughts on this one? Okay. Another question. I've noticed what seems to be a shift, someone says, in the minimum requirements in hiring PNAs in management position, and some of these are a little specific. The shift is from a master's preferred to a PhD strongly preferred. Should all of us be going out to get PhDs?
I'm going to touch that. I have a doctorate, and it's not in human resources, and I have a master's, and it's not in human resources. And so education is important, but there's so much more that we learn just from interacting with people and living our lives. And those are skills that you don't necessarily learn in a classroom. Having served on the Duluth School Board for 16 years, I've heard that our graduates don't have the skills to interact with kids who are different from them in our public school system. So education is important, but it's not the only thing that's needed. And I like those generic job descriptions where they say a BA or the equivalent, where they take into consideration those skills that people get outside of a classroom. Again, education is important. I know my father taught me that, and that's why I have the multiple degrees that I have. But I think that something else has taught me the ability to be in the position that I am and do the work that I do.
Anyone else want to take a moment to talk about the balance? What is the balance? What is it that we should be focusing on?
Well, this is a great example of SCARF, right? Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And so I think a challenge that we all have, and probably haven't talked about that too much, is domination versus partnership and the hierarchy. And I think there was a fellow here last spring who came to talk about somebodies and nobodies. and especially in the academy in regards to status differentials. And I think it might be hard to navigate those things. I think if you're in a middle management position or a PA position, and you know, we put a high priority on education, and so it's challenging, I think, to think about the power differential there. And I'm not sure necessarily a PhD prepared person has as much insight, knowledge, skill, or ability as perhaps somebody else. So I have been experimenting recently with an assessment called Core Values Index, CVI, it's developed by Taylor Protocols. And it's really interesting that how you show up at work, if you're matched with your core value, then you are sort of in a flow state. If you are not living up to your core value and what your major contribution is to the organization and the context, you will either leave that job, you will rework your job, or you will sabotage the system in such a way that it will be dysfunctional. And so it goes back to this inner work and knowing what your core values are. The core values this assesses as your ability to be a builder, a banker, a merchant, or an innovator, and it's based on power, wisdom, love, and knowledge. So there's a lot there that could be unpacked.
And Susan, you're holding a number of questions from online and the audience, I believe.
Right. We have a question from the audience that as Lars said, can we ever have enough leadership? But is that really true? Don't we need some people who are willing to just do and need to take some direction? I fear that generations will be unwilling to take on the working roles, and they feel that they deserve the responsibility of leadership. So what are your thoughts?
Oh, that's a fair question. And I think maybe to give some additional context to joking aside, I mean, I do think leadership of self, I think, is what, you know, the ability to have absolutely followership. I mean, there's a president of the University of Minnesota, Dr. Kaler. We have our deans, we have department chairs, we have our colleagues in P&A, governance structures here that are representative of voice. I do think that increasingly, and we've talked about in this conversation so far, in an increasingly complex world with interdependencies and correlated, this action triggers multiple reactions, that owning oneself, knowing oneself, which you've heard repeatedly, even more intimately than ever before is required. And I think leadership comes out of, we've heard the conversation about, you know, coming from my core values. Who am I? Do I know that? And absolutely followership in terms of being true to oneself and taking steps forward. You can be a leader and a follower. I think perhaps I was conveying is the amount of self-awareness required to own taking proactive steps to make impact. We need more than ever, but absolutely it's found in many places.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
So building on Chris's notion about strengths and followership, one of the assignments that I have my leadership students do is there's another book called Strengths-Based Leadership by Tom Rath and Barry Conchie, and they take the StrengthsFinders assessment, and I have students create a table of their top 5 signature strengths, but Gallup has also discerned that what followers want in a leader are 4 things: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And so what the students do is they figure out what their strength is, and there's this book, it gives you specific strategies. If you've got this strength, here's how you can instill trust in people. Here's how you can do compassion. Here's hope. Here's stability. That continues to be one of the most significant positive reflections and learnings that students take out of the leadership courses that I teach, and we talk a lot about leadership and followership, and I think that it's, again, polarity to manage. So,
Dean Nichols, did you want a word? And then we'll go to a next question. We have about
Let's
5
just go to,
minutes.
let's just go to another question.
So, Susan?
Let's stay on the leadership vein. Leading up is very important here in the academic environment, and but in our academic environment, they select faculty to serve as leaders based on their academic achievements rather than on their leadership skills. What advice do you have for those of us leading up?
Should I do that?
Please
Now,
do that.
I've got to say, I have another role in the university right now that has kind of added on to the other one, and that is to be a point person for the implementation of this new campus strategic plan. One of the things I hear a lot about as I move to different groups and hear them talking about initiatives in the plan and what their role in it may be is I hear this word leadership repeatedly. And I'm really excited about that. I think we could do, for the extent of change, that cultural change that this vision of a different kind of campus holds, I think that really being interested in examining and talking about leadership continuously holds just a lot of promise. So, and I do think, I mean, there has been a tendency for you elevate people to a leadership position because of their academic work, but that doesn't necessarily make them a good leader. You hear people in some of these groups I've been out in who say, well, what's really important in the lab is having good leadership in the lab. So I think we're going to be talking a lot more about it. There's no silver bullet. We have touched on many of the things, but just the conversation about leadership, I think, is really important. If I had to boil it down to one word, I would boil it down to the word I heard when I asked somebody. So this is in the context of department chairing. There are important figures here because they're right on the ground there where all the work goes on. So I asked somebody, so what constitutes a really effective leader at a department level? And the answer came back, they're inspiring. So, you know, I hope we have lots more conversations like this about leadership, and I hope that we can surface more words like be inspiring. And somebody can ask, well, how do you be inspiring? Okay, well, let's talk about that. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be talking a lot more about leadership. There isn't a silver bullet. There's not a neat definition, but to have ongoing conversations about it and share those kind of insights like, well, they're inspiring. Well, yeah. So I'm very hopeful.
So we'll take that as the Professional Development and Recognition Subcommittee as a charge as part of our work plan for next year. Susan, I'm going to have you do one more question, and that would put us at time. So choose a good one, please.
We have a couple of questions on succession planning. And actually online as well as in the audience, can you expand on what is needed for succession planning? Do you anticipate a shortage of skilled workers? And what would be creative ways to retain talent? Is there an appetite for allowing more flexibility of hours for older workers?
All right, so we'll get some quick comments. Who wants to take that?
I mentioned succession planning. What it means to me is to find out what it is that people that I supervise want to do. What it means for me is I'm a baby boomer, and I am preparing those that I supervise to step in if they so choose when I leave. So they need to know everything that I know, which I think is a lot. And they need to know the skills that are needed. And if there's additional education that is required, then I need to also allow them the opportunity to take those courses that they need to be able to apply for such a position or be put in such a position.
I think it's important to identify and invite people. There are a lot of people out there who would never maybe imagine that they would be able to progress, but if you see talent and you see strength in people and you really have, it's incredible to extend an invitation or tap somebody on the shoulder and invite them to engage in this conversation in a mentoring sort of relationship.
I think there's a couple of components of succession planning. I was just doing a succession planning with one of our teams just yesterday morning, and there's two aspects to it that I think are really important to consider. One is the person's readiness level. So we've got tools that we use where we lay out a whole team, and we've got different individuals listed, and are they ready now, like 0 to 12 months? Are they ready 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3, 3 to 4? And you kind of map it out. We use a lot of visual management in my organization, kind of putting out in front of us. So understanding readiness level, I think, is critical, because you don't want to put someone, the worst mistake we can all make, all of us, is taking someone who's not quite ready, throwing them into the job, and they don't work. It's bad for everyone. So really understanding the readiness level is critical. And I think if you've got some time, if you if you decide that someone might be ready to take over your role in the next 2-3 years, you've actually got a little time on your side, which is great. A lot of times we don't have that luxury. So one of the things we focus on is setting up action plans and development plans for each person. So if we think that in 2 years they can get to be the next manager of microbiology or something, what's it going to take to get them there? Let's start now. Let's develop measurable actions to help get them there and convey that to them. They're part of that process so that they have buy-in as well. You don't just, as the manager or the professional person, set up a plan, include them in that plan, invite them, as you said, Dan, and you'll be amazed at how much more ready they truly are.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to hold us. We are at time. Panelists, on behalf of the over 5,200 PNAs across the enterprise, thank you very, very much. We don't pay. All of these people have generously contributed their time and expertise, but we do pay in the sense of our gratitude and appreciation. So if you would join me now in thanking our panelists. And I just want to also extend my thanks to the PD&R committee. I think we've done an outstanding job. We've had a great year. Thank you for all your hard work in putting this on, and I think Sherry's going to close us out.
Well, again, thank you so much to our panelists who have shared so deeply and richly from their deep pools of knowledge and expertise. We can't thank you enough. And with that, before we adjourn to the reception area, I just want to go back to a little housekeeping. Our next activity will be a small group activity, and you will notice on your name tags that there's a number. That number corresponds with numbers that are on balloons and on the tables that are outside. We will all convene, as we leave here, we'll convene by number to the tables that are assigned and have an opportunity to be able to think about and talk about what we gained from this opportunity to hear from our experts here in professional development. We will then be able to say, how do these things that we have gained, this knowledge that we've gained today, how can I apply that to my individual career? And so we'll be talking about that. And then at that point, once we've had that opportunity, then we will then have refreshments and conclude our afternoon. So thank you again for coming and joining us and hearing from our panelists. And we will adjourn to the reception area. Oh, one thing before we go. We do have some additional questions that have come in, and we'd like to be able to address those in some way, and we'll figure out what that is and be able to provide some additional answers to the questions that have been asked. Thank you.